नमस्कार, मी योगिता आपटे. पर्सिस्टंट फाउंडेशन आणि देशपांडे फाउंडेशन यांच्या नमस्कार, मी योगिता आपटे. पर्सिस्टंट फाउंडेशन आणि देशपांडे फाउंडेशन यांच्या संयुक्त विद्यमाने आज एका चर्चासत्राचे आयोजन करण्यात आलेले आहे. या चर्चासत्राची सुरुवात आपण बरोबर 4:30 वाजता करणार आहोत. आता निमंत्रित यायला लागलेले आहेत. त्यांच्यात इन्फॉर्मल गप्पा सुरू झालेल्या आहेत. 4:30 वाजता आपण याच ठिकाणी परत भेटणार आहोत.
let's make this not just into questions and answers, but if you have a point of view or if you want to add your wisdom to the conversations, please do, because I think we're all here to learn and see how we can all make a difference. So, in terms of my growing up, I think most of my life has been serendipity. So it's not like I was, my dad was a government servant, so it's not like I knew anything about business or even had the slightest inclination of doing anything in business. But, within the family, education was very important. And so we all paid a lot of attention to education, and we did well. And I think throughout my life, every 4 or 5 years or so, I've found that I come across situations where, I think the first company didn't work out. And so I had to take a break for about 6 months before I regrouped and started another one. And those 6 months where you wake up and you have almost nothing to do, where you create a white space, it's actually turns out to be a life-changing experience. Because, otherwise what happens is you incrementally lead your life. You're doing something, you do more of it and more of it and more of it. But when I had that involuntary break, about is it better now? Okay. So when I had that involuntary break, I think after a while, you're so consumed by what happens every day incrementally, and then you go away from what you do every day, you come back 4 months, 6 months later, you find that not too many things have really changed. And so you wonder why you're wasting all your time looking at these little things every day and worrying about a lot of these things. And so after that, I've probably very consciously taken a break about 5, 6 months every 5 years. And that's how I went from being a professor to an entrepreneur to being a little bit more of an investor, and then investor to this foundation. So I think it's my life is not like pre-planned so that I get to do these things. It's just a serendipity. You meet people, you come across conversations that go on, and they just trigger something, and then do it and make it fun. So
I want to pick on some of the things that you just mentioned and related to college and college education. There is a lot of discussion, especially post-COVID, about the future of colleges and how universities are changing. You are very active in MIT and also at other places. So you mentioned that the gap that you had, the white space, that was very vital for your learning and for various things. But when we look at colleges today, we are trying to cram more and more within those. We are trying to reduce the gaps and the white spaces in some sense, because we want more and more of the curriculum, learn this, learn that. We are forcing our kids to do all these things all the time. We are not necessarily allowing them that gap. So that is one point you mentioned, which I wanted you to reflect on. Another related context was that, we are, there's this whole thing that you talked about, connections, meeting people. So how important was the group that you hung out with in IIT Madras and the students that you had with you in your cohort? How important was that group as far as your career and your life has been in terms of the connections and the networks that you have built?
No, very, very important. I think, in fact, Suman Padke is here, one of my classmates from IIT Madras. I came from little towns. I was a Kannada medium student. And so, and also I came from a middle class family where your comfort zone is very, very small. Nobody ever smokes, nobody does this, nobody does that. So the environment and the structure that you grow in is very restricted. And when you start swimming into a bigger ocean, where suddenly you see people from Ceylon or some North India, even that is like a mind-opening experience. So each one of these things, I think, they broaden your comfort zone. Every failure, every time you go into a strange environment and you live there. This is part of the reason why so many Indians who now go to US are being so successful. Because, to be an entrepreneur, you need out-of-box thinking. And out-of-box thinking comes very naturally for anybody who is out of that box. And so people who come to Pune from outside, will always do better than people living in Pune, right? Because people living in Pune, you get used to a certain way of life and you take things for granted. Whereas whenever people come from outside, suddenly they see things, they see opportunities, they see different things. So I think IIT was one of those first big experiences. And then I went to Canada and US, and they just continued to be experiences that just broaden your horizons.
You were a faculty member and a professor. It's something that, I've always felt that, I missed out. Probably I should have been one too. But it's something that you were doing for a while, and then you moved into entrepreneurial roles. Do you ever missed being a faculty? Did you go back ever to teach again? And
well, I think educational institutions are real temples. They're very, very important. So it's 22 years ago when I had enough of the startups and companies, I did join the board of MIT. So I do spend quite a bit of time at MIT and IIT Madras, and we run a symposium for universities in US for about 120 universities and so on. So I'm not a full-time faculty member, which is like a lot of work, but I do enjoy going and meeting younger people and talking to them and doing guest lectures and so on. So it's a lot of fun.
So you again, I've of course known you for more than 25 years now, and you have gone through multiple companies that you have always built and sold. So you're what would be called a serial entrepreneur. What were your motivations for moving from one company to the other, and why wouldn't you have just stayed on in one company, like potentially I did?
Well, probably I was not as smart as you are,
I know.
Well, I think what I found is that I enjoy doing new things, but after you do it for 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, it becomes a chore. And when something starts becoming a chore, I've sort of found this technique of giving it up, walking away from it, for 2 reasons. Number one, it's not that much fun anymore. And secondly, there is somebody else who would appreciate that opportunity that much more. And they probably would do a better job than what I'm doing right now. And so it's a win-win. But the only thing is, walking away from a hill where you're the king is very unnerving if you haven't done it before. But it's such a exhilarating experience when suddenly you build something. It's like you build a castle, and then you say, I don't want to live in this castle, and you walk away. And it's a very liberating experience because it just liberates you from all the obligations you have and everything else. And then it just opens up a whole new opportunity to do things that you had never done before.
Nice. And you mentioned the fact that you work with MIT and you run that program where you have been helping research from within universities to be more productionized and commercialized and all that. Could you talk a little bit about that? And I know you're doing something like that at IIT Madras as well. I think there are a lot of people here who are from research institutions who could benefit from some of your experience on that.
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of you in educational institutions relate to this. The world somehow seems to separate the thinkers and the doers, right? Because when you have smart people, whether it's think tanks or university professors, researchers, you need to create a nurturing environment for them. You cannot mandate innovation, right? But when you create a nurturing environment, typically it becomes clubby. And then it moves further and further away from the real world. And then what happens is that they all form a club, and they get into more impressing each other as opposed to impact, even though their genuine desire is to have an impact. So what I realized is that for any nurturing environment, for it to have an impact, you have to connect it back to relevance. And so an innovator, for example, even MIT, when I started 22 years ago, the innovators would think about ideas, they would patent the technology, and then the technology license offices would go and try to peddle those technologies. And very few of them actually had an impact. And so this Deshpande Center that we opened at MIT, the simple idea there was to connect the innovator to relevance as they're innovating, as opposed to waiting for the whole innovation to happen. And it turned out within 3 years that anything that went through the Deshpande Center at MIT was 3 times more likely to have an impact than otherwise.
Oh.
And because, all the researchers are super smart people. I mean, they don't get to be where they are if they're not very smart. But it's just that they tend not to get out of the campus. They don't know how to pick up a phone and make a cold call or make a sales call kind of a thing. So once they learn the trick of being able to reach out to other people and reach that relevance, they do amazing work. And so once that was successful, then I worked with National Science Foundation to do a program called ICOR in US, which is now a nationwide program. It's at the very central focus of all the research, translational research that goes on in India, in US, and thousands of companies are coming out of it, particularly from Kansas and Ohio and Florida and all these places, not only just MIT and Stanford. And so it's a pretty powerful tool if you want to have an impact with the thinkers and the policymakers. You have to have a very conscious way of connecting them to relevance. And so we brought that program back to India. So it's based out of IIT Madras, but actually it runs out of IIT Bombay, IIT Delhi, IISc, and so on. It's a nationwide program because India is now spending close to 100,000 crores a year and would love to see that 100,000 crores have a bigger impact. So we're trying to duplicate that program in India now.
Perfect. I wanted to use that connection of creating the ecosystem that you built out for taking scientists and innovators to relevance and impact and take that into the social sector as well. But before we get that, maybe we can ask if anyone has a question on the early part of Desh's journey. We have Amit here. I'm sure you can ask a question. We should be able to hear you, but if you're recording, then we need a mic.
Yeah, my question was about the last point that you just mentioned. You have great experience with MIT and with IIT Madras. What do we need to do, and how can we alumni help to get IIT Madras, IIT Bombay somewhere near where MIT stands today? All of us have ideas, but would like to hear from you, since you have experience at both sides. Thanks.
Yeah, so the center in IIT Madras is called Gopalakrishna Deshpande Center, and the program they run is Incubate. And the way the program works is that any faculty member, he can apply for the program, but he has to apply together with a lead entrepreneur, which is typically a graduate student or a postdoc, and an external mentor. So 3 of them have to apply for this program together. Typically, there is 10 people in the cohort. So 30 of them go through a 1-week boot camp in terms of how to think about this. And then over the next 6 weeks, they actually go and meet 100 prospects. They're not supposed to peddle their idea, but to really do a market discovery. At the end of the whole process, they come to one of the 3 conclusions. Either it's a great idea, maybe they should do something with it, or it's an okay idea, but maybe they should pivot and do something else so that it can be useful, or don't even bother. And typically, the programs, both in US and India, we find that it's a third, and a third. And so we need a lot of mentors. So if anybody wants to help, sign up to be mentors for this program. And it's an amazing experience because you also get to experience younger IIT students and new ideas and so on. So that's a great way to participate.
Actually, there was one more question there, and then we'll take yours as well, Giri. What I'm going to suggest is if you can keep your question to this part of his journey, because I'm going to open it at the end again for just general questions. So let's get Giri your question. I think somebody else.
This you talked about.
Good if you name.
I'm
introduce yourself.
Girindra Kasmarkar. So thanks for that. You talked about serial entrepreneurship, where you walk away from your castle and go on to the next hill to become the king. So that's one kind of switch. But the bigger switch is when you want to go to a hill where you don't want to be a king. There are different CEOs, different founders, and you still have your objectives and you want to do it through them. What is the learning there? What do you focus on in that role and not focus on and let the CEOs do that?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah. So, I think it's a question of how do you rally people to come together to a common goal? And I think people really respect when you truly are committed to that goal. And so everything that you do, all decisions that you make, the roles that you play, everything is there's only one thing you're trying to optimize, which is the mission of that organization. Doesn't matter whether it's a social venture or a for-profit venture. And the more genuine you are with that mission, and if you take yourself out of it, I think what happens is things start falling apart when you become very self-serving. So for example, when you do capability assessment, if it's you, you're all capable. Everybody else is not capable. That doesn't work, right? So you really have to say, am I the right chairman? Am I the right CEO? And if you're not the right CEO, you should have the nerve to step out and let somebody else come in and be the CEO. So the more genuine you are about that commitment to the mission, the easier it is to rally and bring people together. And people appreciate that.
Yeah, Shekhar?
Shekhar Mande. You talked about academicians forming a club and probably losing sight of relevance at one particular point of time. Now that's quite a case that we are very familiar with. I'm an academician, so we are very familiar with this particular situation. So how do you actually really shake the system up so that this group of academicians can come and start finding relevance? Is there some recipe that, environments like MIT and all are more conducive to that than some of our institutes here?
So no. That's exactly what this program is in Incubate in IIT Madras. So for example, MIT has 1,000 faculty, out of which probably about 100 of them are pure scientists. They're all like Nobel Prize kind of guys, and they should be doing what they do best because it's not the impact that affects them. But a good 900 of them are all driven by impact. They want to cure cancer, or they want to do this, they want to solve the climate problem, whatever. So if they have an intention to solve a particular problem, we just have to give them opportunities to connect to the people who are doers. It's really, the word somehow separates into thinkers and doers. And what we need to do is to get the thinkers to do and doers to think, connecting them. So what this institute does in the center in IIT Madras that we have, which is a nationwide program, it just connects them. And what happens is that once you make a connection and the thinkers reach out to other people, it's first of all, if you're a researcher, if you're a part of some institute, your reach is fantastic. You can call any CEO, any CTO, anybody in the company, they'll all take your calls. That's not particularly for the students. Any student can call any of these big shots, they will take the call actually, right? But they don't know that they can actually reach out. And so it's just showing them. So what happens is, I talked about the 3 results. Something you do, something more you have to do, something that won't work at all. But even the third of the professors who are going through this program, where they get to the conclusion that this idea is no good, don't even bother, they're so thankful for going through the program because now they've learned how to reach outside of the campus. So whatever idea that they have of the impact, then they start building a community of those people who are actually practitioners. And then it becomes very easy because what happens is if you're a thinker, if you have one idea today, what happens a month from now is you'll have 10 more ideas because that's your business. Your business is to just keep coming up with lots of ideas. So the key question is, how do you pick and choose which of these 10 ideas you should pursue? And that's where you'll need the help in terms of relevance.
I want to take this discussion forward to your socially relevant projects. You have built some, of course, Deshpande Foundation has been the core of many of your other initiatives, but all of you are very familiar with Akshay Patra, which you got from infancy to scale. You've done the same with many of your teaching, learning programs, getting students to get through sandboxes and all that. And you also shared how you have been able to get good ideas from researchers into companies. Would you relate that to good ideas from, not necessarily researchers, but good ideas from general people, taking them into society, relevance changing from being relevance in terms of dollars to relevance in terms of impact. How are they different? And can you share a bit of some of the projects that you have done? I mean, you have a fantastic list. I think Nanda didn't do a good job of sharing all of them. But if you could talk a bit of those and get our people here familiar with some of them,
Sure.
and then relate the two, that would be a good
Yeah.
next step.
So one simple way to sort of think about the world is that there is 7 billion people in the world, out of which roughly about 2 billion have disposable income, and 5 billion people don't have disposable income. And they both have problems. And solving their problems is what life is all about, whether it's a business or a social enterprise, right? But the way you solve the problems of those 2 billion people who have disposable income is very different than the way you would solve the problems of the 5 billion people. How is it different? Because if you have disposable income, they're Googling for solutions. So if you want to have an impact on their lives, you actually have to compete for the opportunity, which means they won't listen to you unless you bring something new. So innovation becomes very important. So innovation has to meet relevance to create an impact. And that's what all startups are all about, right? I mean, you come up with a new idea, either a technology idea, a business idea, a process idea, something that's new, and you direct it to some burning problem that the people have, and that creates a company, a for-profit company. But it typically has impact on the people who have disposable income. Now, when you come to the people who don't have disposable income, particularly if you start going to the bottom of it, they're just struggling to get through the day. So for them, this earth-shattering patents and most competitive solutions and biggest innovations, they don't really make much sense. So for them, that equation gets turned around. It really becomes relevance plus innovation is equal to impact. So you have to co-create the solution with them. You have to build capacity within those communities to accept that new solution. And then you start injecting innovation into it. And so, because innovation is essential, because if you keep doing the same thing, nothing is going to change. But the rate at which you inject that innovation has to be together with those people. Because no company, no enterprise ever runs properly if you don't understand your customer base. And for all of us sitting in this room, trying to understand the customer base where people don't have disposable income or just struggling to get through the day is very difficult. So the biggest mistake most of us do, and most of my colleagues do in Silicon Valley, is that they all ask the wrong question. They say, what is it that I can give that I'm good at? And what is it they're good at? They're good at innovation, right? So most of them want to write this software on an Android phone or an iPhone, which will solve the education problem for the whole world so that nobody will ever have any problems with education, right? But that's not the issue. The issue is you could do all that stuff, and it will benefit the people in the top because they have disposable income. But people in the bottom will not benefit with this. So Anand, what we have found is that, and that was the reason why we started this program in Hubli, Social Innovation Sandbox, is to co-create the solution with the people who need those solutions, slowly start scaling it by creating capacity within those communities. But the beauty is, as the program starts scaling, you'll have an opportunity to use all the tools that you develop for the 2 billion people economy. For the 2 billion people economy to be competitive, you need advanced technology, you need financial engineering, you need process, you need project management, you need strategic thinking, you need all those tools. And it gives you an opportunity to bring all those tools to this sector so that you can continuously make your solutions cheaper, better, faster, and scale them. So there is a place for innovation in the social sector, but it has to follow co-creation with the people who need those solutions.
Can you relate that to some of the, I think it's worth sharing, and you mentioned some of them yesterday, some of the programs that you're working on, specifically Akshay Patra, of course everyone knows about that, but you could share how you were able to scale that, and how did it start, and how you thought about it. And also you mentioned about how you're making a difference to college students who are not able to find jobs, and then your farm pond activities,
Yeah.
And many of the activities that you are doing through Deshpande Foundation that are relevant, that have come through your experiments. And none of them started perhaps on day one. When you first started, perhaps you were thinking at it in a certain way. And over the years, I'm sure you have learned many different things through the journey. So if you could comment a bit on some of those, especially for people in Maharashtra and in Pune, what can we do to help you and learn from you in these social ventures?
Yeah. So what's the difference between the, let's say the startups or companies that we build
Right.
and the social enterprises? In the for-profit sector, one of the powerful tools you have is a feedback from the customer back to the company. That is, doesn't matter how crazy your idea is, within a year, 2 years, or 3 years, if you don't find a solution for which somebody is willing to pay, and what they pay is more than what it costs you, you don't have a company. The company will go bankrupt, right? So in the for-profit sector, you only have performing assets. In the non-profit sector, people have a huge amount of compassion. They start with compassion, but the source of money does not relate that much to the people that you benefit. So you don't have that
Can you
feedback
explain
loop.
that to me?
Oh, the people that you try to help are not the people who are giving you the money.
Okay.
The money comes from somebody else,
Donors.
and the beneficiaries are here. So you lack that feedback loop. So what happens is, some of them are doing excellent work, but both US and India have 3.5 million NGOs, out of which 99.9% of them are useless, right? Because they're subscale, very small. They do something, let's say you help 100 kids today, next year you help 3, that's okay. So it doesn't really matter. And also the funders drive what you do. So you start a school, somebody else will come say, school is important, but healthcare is very important. And so you take his money, and within that one room, you also start a clinic. And so it's a land of the living dead, actually.
But how did you change that? But you have been able to break that. Of course, you have those point, whatever, 005. You have 3 or 4, 5, 10 examples of this that you have personally changed.
Yeah.
So what did you
one
do
of the
differently?
things we need to bring a change in the social sector is the same. So we have to bring the compassion to the for-profit sector, because the for-profit sector has to compete so heavily for the top line, the bottom line, that in the process they lose their compassion for the people, for the environment, and they mess a lot of things up. So we need to bring compassion to the for-profit sector, but similarly, we need to bring the execution excellence to the for-profit sector, right? And non-profit sector, sorry. Hey, nobody's sleeping. But to be able to do that, the funders have to change their mindset. You have to be able to fund R&D. In the for-profit sector, if you have version 1.0, unless you come up with 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0 continuously, you don't survive, right? How many times do you see that in the non-profit sector? They'll have a solution. 50 years later, it's the same video, same solution. Nothing has to change. So we have to find a way to continuously fund that organization to be able to come up with 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and keep promoting it. But non-profits organizations cannot do that because they don't have a balance sheet. They cannot be strategic in what they do. So the advantage that we had was we have a good balance sheet, right? Because we are the funders. And so we said, instead of trying to fund other organizations, let us start doing these things ourselves and see if we can prove that this model works. So for example, Farm Pond program, it's about 10 years old now. And actually the program started when Ratan had come to Hubli. And I was talking to him and I said, hey, farmers, we get a lot of rain. We get 60 to 80 centimeters of rain, but it's drought all the time because they don't have water when they need it, right? It just flows away. So we said, why don't we do a farm pond, just dig a hole 100 feet by 100 feet by 12 feet and capture the rainwater, and it'll irrigate land and double 5 acres of land and double and triple the income. So he said, sure, why don't we try it? So he gave us 5 Tata Hitachi machines. So in the next 2 years, we built 150 of them, free of cost for the farmers, so that we can prove that actually they can make more money. And it turned out that they could make more money. And so over the next 5 years, we built about 5,000 of them. And the typical farm pond costs about 1 lakh, so it's not really that cheap. But they paid 75% of it, the 5,000 farmers, and we paid 25% of it. And now we have launched a program to build 100,000 of them, where the farmer upfront pays 20%, which is 20,000, and SBI and HDFC gives a loan of 80,000, and we build a farm pond. The farmer makes more money. He returns that money within 2 years. He builds his credit line, and now it's a totally scalable program, right? And because it has a scale now, it also allows us to deploy a lot of technology. So we have a Rural Transformation Technology Center, which actually tracks 30 satellites. It collects about petabytes of data every month. And given any piece of land in India, we can recreate the history of water for that land for the last 12 years. So we can ideally locate the farm pond. We use the same center to actually build farm ponds, because now we're scaling the program. This year alone, we're building about 8,000 of them, which means it's about 700-800 of these machines all over the place. So, it's like a big operation, right? So we have to manage logistics and make sure everything is running properly and everything else. And then once the pond is built, we can monitor the crop from the satellites to make sure the farmer is actually taking advantage of the water, and he repays the loan. Because one of our promise to SBI and HDFC is that we'll actually achieve 0 default. And so far, it's going really good. So, and so continuously learning how to do this. So we're doing about 250 farm ponds in Maharashtra this year. We're working through a lot of the very capable partners who are all here today. And so, where does the product development come in here? Because the soil is slightly different in Maharashtra. So we don't know whether we need to put liners, not how to put liners. There's a whole bunch of new technologies now to seal the bottom so that it doesn't seep the water or all that kind of stuff. So there is a lot of new things that you can bring to the solution. But I think it's coming up with these. So this model has 2 very powerful things. Number one, it is scalable because they are paying for the whole thing. Number 2, it has a fantastic feedback loop. Sitting in Boston, I don't have to worry whether it's a good program or a bad program. As long as the farmers are actually paying money for this, I know it's a good program. Otherwise, why would they line up and say, I want another 10,000 farm ponds, right? So I think.
So how did you convince them? So you did the first 500, you said, for free. And they probably saw that they got some benefit out of it. And then you were able to convince them that they should pay so much, everyone should pay so much. So when you are looking at people chipping in for collective good in the future, how do you make that?
It's not a collective good, it's his own good, right?
It's his own good, but everyone has to be willing to, and everyone will say, well, I don't have that much, I don't use the elevator, I'm on the ground floor.
No. I think the idea here.
We are in Pune here.
Yeah. The idea here is not to push anybody into it, right? I mean, you don't want to oversell these solutions. It's almost like they're lining up.
Yeah, but everyone has to be there together, right?
No, because it's an individual thing. If you have a farm pond.
But the pond is, you still need to get.
No, it's owned by an individual farmer.
Everyone has his own farm pond.
Yeah, that's the beauty. That simplifies the solution.
Yeah.
Because when you build these community watersheds and so on, you need governance. You need a way to, because then what happens is the most powerful guy gets the biggest pump and sucks all the water out, right? And so you have to manage a lot of that governance. And ultimately we have to, our society has to get sophisticated enough to have those kind of governance. But this particular solution, we simplified it to the point.
But you need to have land to be able to do this for your own thing.
Yeah, it only helps people who have 2 acres, 5 acres of land. So typically we build 50 to 100 farm ponds in a village. But what happens is that once you build 50 to 100, because we already built 7,000 of these, so if you go to these areas where you have these 7,000 farm ponds, the nature of the village changes dramatically. What happens is that all those people need more labor now. So very few people from these villages go to the cities for construction work and everything else. And then all these farmers then start saying, hey, what can we do for our children? So we run a program for skilling and so on. So,
Can you talk through the other one that you mentioned yesterday regarding getting school children meaning college students, essentially job ready, and how you've been able to transform their lives in some sense because of the program? Because I think that's a program that many people here might relate to or would be willing to get you going, and you're now starting to do that in Maharashtra as well.
right. So, I think the good thing is in India, the parents are willing to do anything to educate their children, right? Which is fantastic.
That's true for even the 5 billion that don't have disposable income.
Not everywhere in the world, only in India, actually. Because somehow in India, parents, they don't mind, having one meal a day, but they want to educate their children. But unfortunately, if you go to these villages or taluka places, a lot of the young men and women go through 15 years of education, get BA, BSc, BCom, all that stuff, and very few of them get jobs. It's almost like 1 or 2% of them may get some jobs. So what we did was this program again started about 10 years ago, where we bring them to our residential campus, and in 4 months, we can whip them into shape where they all get jobs. So our placement rate is 100%. And we've done 14,000 of them, and now we're scaling the program. And all we do is teach them some English, teach them interview skills, a little bit of computers, and just the work ethic. Because, and they all make maybe 2 to 3 lakhs a year. So it's not like a very highly paid job. But for those jobs, what you really need is ability to show up to work on time, understand clearly what needs to get done, and get it done by the end of the day. So they're simple things. And so out of the 14,000 now, some of them are up to 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, it's all selection, right? 1 or 2% of them.
But you mentioned this, seems like very simple stuff. Why should it need you to do this? Why shouldn't every college just do this anyway? Meaning, what you say are fairly simple things. Why not put it into the education system or wherever and just say, coming to school on time, starting things on time, learning some English, you get jobs.
Yeah. No. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's what the new education policy is all about, NEP. NEP is to teach people the new skill set and everything else. But unfortunately, the system gets set in a certain way, and they don't want to change. So what we do here is first so slowly we're trying to bring this change to the education system. And our hope is that in another 5 to 10 years or 15 to 20 years, educational system will change to do all these things, and we don't have to do it anymore. So the way we are transitioning our program, we have a big campus with 1,400 kids can come and stay in the campus and so on. But that's not a very scalable program. So now what we do is we take the program to the college in the final year of the program. So we do it right in the college, and that's why it's now scalable. It's not limited by the campus that we have. And then we said, so first we used to wait until they graduated and then do the remedial program. Now we're doing it in the final year of the program. But then we said, well, let's see if we can take it earlier. So in all the villages now, we run a program where it's a program for the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th class. It's before school and after school. We just teach them English. And within 6 months, they all start fluently speaking English. Not that English is everything, but the fact that they can speak English, everybody in the village gets super excited because they have a lot of people who have BA, MA, and everything else, and they can't speak English. But these kids can. And somehow they get so curious and they get excited, and they're now like exhibiting all those behaviors of actually wanting to do things and everything else. So if I take Anand to one of these villages now, and if I say, Anand is from Pune, any questions for him? All the hands go up like this. which and before the program, not a single hand goes up, right? Because somehow our educational system has become very passive. It's almost like they want to go and watch like TV and come home, right? And so to make them into active learners, it doesn't take that much intervention. So that's the beauty of the intervention, I think.
Let me open it out for a few more questions before we get to more general. Sudhir, you want to say something? And then we had something here as well.
So good evening, this is Sudhir Mehta. I have two questions which are unrelated, but since I have the mic, I'll
Yeah, go ahead.
ask both of them. The first that you spoke about is of this 2 billion and the 6 billion and the change that's happening. In India, to a great extent, there's two things happening. One is we are a much more community-oriented society. The West is much more of an individual kind of society. But at the same time, when we talk about transformation, we've always kind of been behind the eight ball, so as to say. A lot of our, the so-called 2 billion came into the IT and all of these sectors where they started to make more money. My question relates to AI and the change that we all are reading about of what's to come and kind of the pace of change which is expected to change. How is this going to impact a country like India, where even in the last weeks we are seeing that there is this tsunami of disruption coming in the West? Companies like Google, which have all the money of the world but are laying off. For a country like India, what's the relevance, and are we not planning for it in advance? Because again, we are going to be behind, where maybe after a few years we created all of these so-called middle class, and to a great extent they may be without jobs in the future or without what they are doing today. Your comments on that?
What's your second question also?
So that's on a completely unrelated area, and that is again relates to what I mentioned about the individualistic and the community sector. How do you get people to get out of cynicism in a country like India to a great extent, where we believe we have all the solutions? It's like our city. We keep our houses clean, but then you go out and everything is a gutter. And we have all of the so-called educated people of the city. And as collectively, we've absolutely failed at doing it. How do you change this cynicism?
Right. So your first question, I think what technology is just a tremendously powerful thing. And it's not going to stop. It's going to keep going, right? But it does create haves and have-nots. There's going to be technologies that will automate, and there'll be people who are being automated. So in US, this two tiers that I talked about, US it would be 80%, 20%. In India, it will be 20%, 80% right now. So I think as a society, as a private citizens, as a government, we always need to make sure that we create an ecosystem for the people who are being left behind to come back into the mainstream in their own way. What we're seeing right now, all the firing and everything else, it's all temporary. I mean, I think what happens is whenever something good happens, markets get overrated. The valuations are huge, so cash becomes very free. People start spending like crazy. And then when that gets tight, they have to all tighten up a little bit. But I see that more as a temporary phenomenon. I mean, it does cause a lot of pain for a lot of people who are going through it, but it's a temporary phenomenon. So I would not worry too much about that part of it. In terms of individualistic and civic sense and how do we get these things going, I think one thing I've found is that there are vibrant communities and there are impoverished communities. Same thing with companies, countries. The only difference between an impoverished community and a vibrant community is a mix of people. There are three types of people in this world. A set of people who are oblivious to everything that goes on. That's not this group of people, because you all care. And then there is a set of people who see a problem and complain. And then some people who see a problem and get all excited about it. And a vibrant community always has people who get excited about problems. In fact, like MIT and Harvard and all these things, all these young kids who come there, it's amazing how motivated they are to wanting to do something. Their problem is not having good enough problems to solve. Everybody thinks that this app is going to save your life, and the job is to try to convince you that actually what they're doing is the most important thing, right? But the side effect of that vibrancy is that obvious problems don't hang around too long. because somebody's going to grab it. When a community becomes impoverished, problems become chronic. And when they become chronic, it's very hard to solve them because they're deadlock. And so a few people try, and then they feel victimized, they feel helpless, and then they start complaining. And then complaining becomes the dominant culture. So whenever you go to a society and you see people, within 10 seconds, when they start saying corruption and this can happen, that can happen, everything else, you know it's an impoverished community. And we run a program actually for college kids, and their t-shirt on the back says, problems start with they, solutions start with I. So I think if we can actually, all the programs that we do have that element in it, whether it's young men and women who get jobs, suddenly they start feeling powerful. You say, if you were like this 15 years ago, you wouldn't have needed all these things. But it just awakens them. Because I think once people become problem solvers, once they see a problem and somehow find a way to solve it, it's so empowering that they will never go back and become a complainer. Because complaining is no fun, really. And so you have to find ways to give people a taste of it. And if you get a critical mass of people within a community, let's say 30, 40% of the people who are problem solvers, then I think you have a very vibrant community.
Actually, Sudhir runs is a very important part of our city here. He was the chairman of the Maratha Chamber till recently. And he ran something called Pune Platform for COVID Response, which was quite amazing. I would love to have him share with you what he has done. And now he's trying to convert it into a more Pune platform for civic response. So I know he gets these very sad days when everything seems like it's breaking out. But Sudhir, you do such a wonderful job. You are the change maker for all of us. And we are all with you on doing some of that. And I think we should use Desh to also tell us how to get this going. And there's a question at the back here, but I'm looking this way, but I want to look this side next. Can you go to the lady, please?
Hello, this is Gitanjali. Desh, you may not remember me. I'm from Energy Guru. I'm an innovator, and one of my innovations was actually awarded by you. So I'm always inspired by you. But however, I feel that it's not the innovation that only matters. It's the discoveries that are a lot more impactful. The reason I say that is I come from Latur, which was having maximum farmer suicides in 2014, 15, 16. The modern science had failed, and somebody from the village told me that there is a Parjan Yajna. I did it 3 times. Latur problem solved last 6, 7 years. So I think it's not just about putting the ponds. Why not go a little bit further deeper and maybe discover how the ancient people use these wells and bring those back. And I think we need to go slightly deeper is what I feel. Second thing is, same thing after seeing what happened during those 3 incidences in Latur, after solving the water problem, I said, why not look into the same thing for the COVID as well? You can go and check the graph on May 9th, 10th, 11th, what happened to the second wave. This is using ancient knowledge. So I think we are overestimating the innovation. We need to look into discovery as well.
No, but it's not like the old people did not have innovation, but we cannot just keep saying they were innovative. We have to do what you did. Really find what that innovation was and make it relevant to the current problems. So innovation does not mean it only has to come from universities or some institution or anything like that. It can come from anybody in the society. Everybody is an innovator, actually, right? And that's what makes a community very vibrant.
Dina, you had a question.
Yeah, my name is Dinanath Kolkar. I work for TCS, part of the Tata Group. So amazing work that you are doing with the farm ponds. A couple of questions. One was related to the satellite one. I was aware of the program as such, but who funds the cost of the satellite images and things like that? Would be interesting more from a commercial point of view. The second one is a very good opportunity that we are seeing. A lot of our people who are working in the cities, who are from the villages, have gone back, and they prefer to stay back and work for them from there. Whatever you are doing, would that potentially tap into such a talent pool, which is very highly educated, but now located back into the rural areas. So whether we should look at that as a big opportunity for a country like India. Thank you.
Yeah, no, good questions. I think the satellite data that we use right now is mostly public data that's available for free. But it's the resolution is not, it's about 10 meters or so. So we have just started getting some data which has lower resolution, which is a paid subscription. But most of the, right now, there's just so much happening in multispectral imaging and everything else that you can get resolutions very, very small if you want to pay for it. But we haven't had to pay too much so far. But I think it's going to be a big revolution in that whole sector. In terms of opportunities for people in the villages, I think the farming income is we don't need all the people working in farming right now to be working on farms, because the farming contribution is a lot less than the number of people who work on farms, right? So the income per farmer has to go up, which also means that the farmers, and some of them, have to do things that are other than farming. And so the concept of village level entrepreneurs is very big right now. In fact, one experiment that we're trying, which Ranu here funds, is a food cluster. There's a place near Sirsi where they grow a lot of bananas and ginger. And a lot of it, the prices fluctuate like crazy and they don't get much of it. So we just building a cluster with 10 lakh machines and 2 crore machine, where they can take these things and dry the banana, and then you make banana powder, and you can get pretty good returns on that. And every person who works on this, a lady, she currently makes about 4,000, but once she does working on this cluster, she can make 10 to 15,000. So their income goes up, and so I think it's just adding more and more value to what they produce or things that go on in the villages. So the village level entrepreneur concept, I think, is a very powerful concept, and there's hundreds of ideas that you can nurture and bring forward, I think.
There's a question there. Let's take that, and then I'll come to you, Ajit.
Hi, my name is Ashwani. This is more of the capital flow for impact. So presently, as how you describe it, the part of the disposable income for the top 2 billion go into form of profits, which becomes foundations, and then go back to bottom thing. Now, can we use technology so the part of that disposable income directly go, even if it's not the whole 2 billion, maybe 200 million or so that the world becomes a more kinder, compassionate place, rather than, it becomes as profits to few people, maybe thousands, 100,000, and then coming down to benefit the bottom 2 billion. How do we use technology to help that?
Yeah, no, I think it's there's an entrepreneur called Prem Jain, he's an Indian guy, who started an organization called Kiva, where, people have needs and people can fund them. But fortunately, in India, there's an organization called Rang De. You can Google and see that. And he actually has an RBI banking license. So he is now connecting a whole bunch of 17 to 20,000 of these people who want to give money, which flows directly to the people who need the money. And it's a loan. So it's not like you're giving the money away. And his non-performing assets are less than 1%. So people are using the money, giving it back. And so I think technology enables it now. And we need to do more of it, because I think we need everybody to be participating in this thing. It cannot be just a few rich guys or a little bit of a CSR money, because more than the money, it also connects them to the cause, which is very important.
Ajit?
Ajit Kebawe. Your programs are pretty well scaled up now. So you've got tens of thousands of ponds, the numbers can go up. So in some sense, you're trading on the government's toes, right? So do you have any relationship, necessarily have a relationship with the government? Because don't they come and ask, what is all this going on? You're drinking so many ponds, and it's our job. And who asked you to do this?
No, actually, the power in democracy, whether it's Akshay Patra or the farm pond, what I found is that when the people that you're trying to help like it and they benefit from it, nobody comes in your way. In fact, Akshay Patra, originally when, in farm ponds, we're not getting any government money at all. So there's no government money involved. So and as long as, if anybody comes in the way, all the people in the village get together and say, get out of the way, right? So it's a very powerful tool. In Akshay Patra, half the money comes from the government, half the money comes from the donors. It's roughly about $40 to feed a child for the whole year. $20 comes from the government because government has a midday meal program, and $20 comes from the donors. Because the government money comes in there, initially, we used to have a lot of problems, when we're maybe serving 100, 200,000 meals a day. When we went to Bihar or some of these places, somebody would invite us, but what would happen is once we go to those schools, all that money now comes directly to Akshay Patra as opposed to the mafia that used to get all that money previously. And so those guys, that becomes a vested party. And they would get in the way. They would puncture the tires and just absolutely get in the way to thing. But what happened was once people start getting the food, it was such a powerful intervention that the next time all the politicians got elected by saying, I'm for Akshay Patra, right? So democracy is very powerful when people that you benefit stand up for what you're doing.
There's a question there.
Good evening, Dr. Deshpande. I come from a very similar pedigree, but not as experienced as most people in the room. I am a computer science graduate from IIT Delhi, but immediately switched to sociology masters, and then I'm doing my PhD right now from University of California, Los Angeles in social anthropology. And I'm in Pune for researching agri-tech firms here. So my questions come from a mix of technology and my IITian friends, and my experience of studying social sciences. So I have a couple of questions. First question is about, I really appreciate your dichotomy between doers and thinkers. But what I find lacking or missing in that dichotomy is the role of social sciences and the imagination of social sciences to bridge that gap. So the dichotomy exists not just because there are these nurturing spaces, but because social sciences are not as valorized as IITians are. And this is something that we have to challenge. And as a person who comes from the both sides, I really have started appreciating how much value that social sciences can bring into this whole discussion. And if you reflect on this, a lot of times we are talking about something which is social sciences, not technology, it's not innovation, it's not entrepreneurship. We are talking social sciences. So that is one thing that I want a comment from you, if you'd like. Second is, I was really perplexed when you said 1,400 children were impacted, but taking it to scale, right? And to my mind, 1,400 is a mind-boggling scale. So what do you mean when you say scale? And if I can just presume that you mean, let's say 1 lakh students being impacted as scale, then do you think there is a notion of power difference here when you say, okay, let's give this one person the power to impact 1 lakh children? So where does that notion of power come into this whole phrasing of impacting in scale?
Right.
And just
right.
last point,
Yeah.
and I want to go back to what Madam said there from Latour's observation. I'm researching agri-tech, which means agriculture and technology, focusing on digital technology. And my switch to sociology happens because I was so saddened by farmer suicide. So my question is, on your ponds example, to my mind, it's not a solution at all, honestly. The reason being, if a solution that out there which creates further dependency of farmers on external factors, then the farmer is not being empowered. Farmer is again encountering one another element which is trying to take profit out of the farmer. And the problem with the whole agrarian distress phenomena that we have been seeing for the last 2 decades is because there is a dependency being created for farmers on external entities. I have looked closely at one agri-tech startup. It is a subsidiary of a large agribusiness. I've shadowed their workers on the ground in Andhra Pradesh, in Haryana. I'm in Pune for another startup and shadowing their workers here. And I've seen how usurious that transaction is. So I want your comment on all these three
Yeah.
points. Thank you so
So
much.
let me give you quick answers. Number one, the social scientists, I think, also need to go through the same transformation of connecting to relevance, right? I mean, connecting to, because, see, for example, any social scientist from MIT, Harvard, can go to foundations and say, I'll solve poverty, $25 million. Immediately, he'll get $25 million, actually. And all his students like yourself will work very hard, and they really mean, genuinely, they want to solve the problems. But on the other side, they have the pressure of trying to come up with something different than what everybody else has said. So if the previous solution is a fourth order polynomial, this guy has to come up with a fifth order polynomial, right? But the ability to absorb any of these ideas for the people that they're trying to come up with is very little. So what's happening is the universities, all you guys who get PhDs, you're an idea factory. You come up with all kinds of ideas, new philosophies, everything else. But the person for whom these ideas are being brought has no capacity to absorb those. So we have to connect this competence and the connectedness. So bridging them is the real challenge in the social sector. I think, businesses which are totally driven by profit, which are trying to squeeze out as much margin as they can from both the producer and the consumer, obviously are going to disadvantage farmer. But when you enable the farmer to get more income for himself, I think that's an enabling thing. And the other question you had was systemic change. What do I mean by systemic change? The number of kids who graduate from villages and talukas is in millions, right? And right now we only do 14,000. So bringing about a way so that you can get any kid graduating from any village or taluka to get employment after they graduate is the goal. If you can bring that about, it's a systemic change. Now, to bring about the systemic change, it does not have to be just our foundation, Deshpande Foundation. In fact, that's what we're doing in Maharashtra now. We're working with other people, right? In fact, if the educational, maybe 5 years, 10 years from now, educational institutions themselves will start doing this little intervention that we do, in which case we don't have to do it at all. In fact, the best exit for a social organization is if they can bring about a transformation so that they don't have to do it themselves. The only reason why the social organizations need to do this intervention is because it's not being done. And so I think my hope is that all the effort that we do becomes a proof of concept for policymakers. If the policymakers, so you have to do it in 1 place, 2 place, 4 place, 8 place, at some point, it becomes obvious that this is the way to do things. And that's the job of the philanthropist and the social sector, to show that it can be done. And then the overall system should take over, and then you've brought about a systemic change. And ultimately, if Akshay Patra does not have to feed a midday meal, if we don't have to do this little intervention to bridge people into employment, we would all have been successful.
Actually, I'm going to take one question. I'm going to take your question later, actually. Let's take this lady.
Hello, I'm Darshana from Vigyan Shala, and I'm a physicist by training, working towards bringing more young women into scientific, technological, and entrepreneurial space through our work at Vigyan Shala. So my question is regarding women's participation in the technology and innovation space, and how it's been in your experience in the West and in India. India is seeing a very unique problem right now. We have nearly 50% of our STEM students are women, but their participation in workforce is below 14%. So less than a third of them eventually make it to the workforce. What we could do, together to solve this with all the people in this room. And how, in your experience, has been women tech entrepreneurs' participation in the West and their access to capital? How does it compare to there and here? Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I think women in India, it's actually very encouraging. When we built our campus, we built a campus which was a hostel for 800 boys and 600 girls. What's happened now is we had to convert the boys' hostel into girls' hostel and the girls' hostel into boys' hostel, right? Because somehow girls are more organized, they enroll themselves quicker and they get the spot right away and so on. So it's very encouraging. And you're seeing that now in IITs and engineering colleges and everything else. But what we need to do is to find women more in leadership positions. And that takes a little bit of time, but also the society as a whole has to actually start working on that, because we need equal participation at all levels, not just at the lower levels. In US, diversity and equity is like a big part of the topic right now. And all the institutions have goals. For example, MIT, the admitting class is about 1,200 students, out of which it's always 50% girls, 50% boys. So in undergraduate, they've reached the equal thing. In graduate studies, it's about 40%, 60%. In the faculty, it's still pretty low. And right now, it's a part of the objective for all the administrators and deans and everything else to give more preference and recruit more women in leadership roles and so on. So it's something that we have to do consciously, but we have to be careful not to compromise on the meritocracy or let that be an excuse for incompetence. So, but I think it's very doable and we have to do it.
Desh, we are sort of about 10 minutes to go. I wanted to spend some time from you specifically around this topic of giving, okay? I know there is a lot of discussion that happens about Indians and Indians giving into, when Indians give, they start with religious things, temples and those kinds of things, and social impact and the kind of stuff that you have done. Most of the people here, including myself, we all think about it but do very little about it. So what has been your journey? How do you inspire or tell us, as people who all are working professionals here, and in this room as well, how should we think about giving and contributing, and how do we feel good about, what should be our methodology or strategy to give?
Right. So first of all, there's a lot of people here who are
already giving,
no doubt of it, doing fantastic work, so I don't want to preach to them. But in general, what I found is that somehow, we get focused on our own work, own careers and everything else. And sometimes we wake up and we think that if you just wrote a big check or gave a year of your life, you can actually solve the problem. You can't. Any problem that you want to solve in the social sector is at least 10 times harder than anything that you solve in the for-profit sector, in your profession. And so you have to start early so that you have time to learn how to do it. And each one of us can only give two things, right? The time and money. And so you decide how much time you want to give, how much money you want to give, and you start the journey early and you slowly start engaging into it. And as you get more and more into it, you have to derive enough out of it, enough pleasure out of it. One of the things that I find is that people who are engaged in philanthropy and giving and working on these things generally are happier people, because I think we all are problem solvers, and we get the option to either solve your own problem or solve somebody else's problems. And it's a lot better. If you solve somebody else's problems, you have less problems. So otherwise, I think it's very easy to get so involved with your own self that every little problem takes a magnitude of its own. So I think giving is not just to sort of a noble thing. It's actually for your own self-development. And there's a lot of joy in it. But that journey has to start early. And as you get more and more taste of it, I think you'll do more and more of it. And we have to all find a way to do it collectively so that we have a bigger impact with whatever little that each one of us can do.
And again, I would like to, of course, Desh, you have been a role model for all of us as someone who has been a professional education-wise. You did a PhD, and then you were a professor. You ran startups, and now you are in this philanthropy mode. And we all are very grateful that you are here today in Pune. So it's an honor and pleasure that you could make it here. And I must say on our behalf that we are all here to support you. We are very keen to work with you. And what would you like from us in some sense that can help you with, how can we help Deshpande Foundation and other things that we can do together as you come to Maharashtra? And we are very welcoming here, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of all of us here. So if you have to say, okay, this was very inspiring, let's do something together, what should we do?
No, I think the problems are multitude and many of them, right? So it's not like if we solve one problem, the whole, in fact, our motto is a step towards rural transformation. We call it a step towards rural transformation because it would be very presumptuous of us to think that we can actually bring about a rural transformation, right? If you can make just a little difference, it's a good thing. So it's going to take a lot of people to do a lot of those little steps to make it all happen. So I think and Pune already has a culture of being very socially conscious and being involved and so on. So if there is ways that we can all learn from each other to be more effective in whatever we are doing, in whatever resources we are using to bring about that transformation, and further that impact more and more, I think that would be a good thing.
I know you have this Deshpande dialogue that you do in Hubli, and you have something happening pretty soon. Can we invite you to do a Deshpande dialogue in Pune one of these days, maybe in the next year or so? And we can also have some of the Pune activities which are, I would say, not at the scale at which you are operating, but perhaps with your guidance, we can see how to scale some of the local initiatives. And I know a lot of people here who run amazing nonprofits and other things, and perhaps with your guidance, we can figure out how to scale them. So scaling Deshpande dialogue here would be something I would love to invite you for, and I hope you come again.
No, this is a beginning.
Yes.
So we can do this every year and maybe scale it more and more. And not everything has to be what the Deshpande Foundation does. And by the way, we are having our conference in Hubli on February 3rd and 4th. So if any of you want to come and see what it's like, you're all welcome to. You need to arrive on February 2nd so that you can do the field trips on February 3rd and attend the conference on the 4th. But there's no reason as to why we shouldn't do one like that in Pune as well, because we have a lot of people doing lots of things like Anand is saying, and if there's a way we can just amplify what each one of you are doing, I think we'll be a better society.
Thanks, Desh. And if somebody has to reach you or Deshpande Foundation, the website is the place to go.
Or Jnanada, we have a
we have a
Punekar right here. So
let me invite Jnanada on the stage. We are sort of at near 6 o'clock. I want to end this function on time. We started on time. So Jnanada, if you could come on stage and tell us if people want to reach out to you or to Deshpande Foundation, how do we do that? And then we will end with today is Republic Day, so we will end with a national anthem.
Absolutely. So Deshpande Foundation India.org is our website. You can reach also on our LinkedIn. I'm here. I'm also on all social medias, and I'll coordinate. If any one of you wants to come to Hubli on 3rd and 4th, I'm here to kind of coordinate that travel. If there is a bus, I'll coordinate a bus. There is a new flight that has started, but unfortunately 4th February is the first flight from Pune to Hubli. But from next time onwards, there is a direct flight from Pune to Hubli. So you're all welcome. I think, Anand, I'm also going to take 1 minute to thank everyone who supported, made this thing possible. Of course, the 2 stalwarts who made it possible are right here. So big round of applause. But Yogita of Persistent Foundation and her team, excellent support. I think from Hubli coming here and doing it, it just felt like doing it at home with family. I'm extremely grateful. And every one of you who supported this, our impact for partnership, all partners are here. Vivek Pawar, Benjamin Matthew, very grateful for showing up. All of you, big-hearted, talented Punekars sitting right here on this day. I thank you all. We started with a poem, but what else can I say? देणाऱ्याने देत जावे and घेणाऱ्याने घेत जावे. So, on that note,
Should we? So let's just stand for the national anthem.
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे